Good day everyone, and welcome to the channel. It's Londononion here with our second Back 4 Blood critical comparison. And the weapons we'll be comparing and contrasting today are the AK47 and the SCAR assault rifle. Now, just some housekeeping before we dissect these weapons. It is important to state the parameters of this critical comparison. First, because of the versatility of deck builds, such as the ones that precede this video, weapons can be morphed into variants that increase strengths or balance out needs according to one's playstyle, and will only complicate the comparison. So, deck build potential will be of minimal consideration. Second, comparison will take place under two main themes: bare bones and fully kitted, which will be explained as we go through the comparison. Lastly, the weapons will be compared based on their common rarity, just for consistency and simplicity. However, I am aware that performance scaling between rarities may create different results if compared at higher levels. At the end, I will state my preference, and I would encourage anybody with opposing or agreeable views to share which of the two weapons they prefer and why. With that, let us get started. To begin our comparison, we're first going to be analyzing the weapons from a bare bones perspective, meaning absolutely no attachments or modifiers of any kind. We have all seen the stats of these two weapons. Anybody taking a simple glance would likely conclude that the SCAR is simply superior or matched in every regard. But numbers and the practical use of a weapon may possibly create a different result. Now, both weapons are automatic and congruent in fire rate. Carrying on a step further, both weapons are also congruent in their effective range. Both maintain maximum shot damage within 19 meters. Their stat numbers naturally give merit to this outcome. The only difference being that the SCAR inflicts 1 damage unit more, or 15 damage units in other words, than the AK47. Additionally, the pierce of the SCAR inflicts approximately 60% of its damage to second targets, while the AK only inflicts 50%, or 7 units of damage, giving the SCAR a natural damage advantage. Now, looking at the accuracy, there seems to be an ironic difference in performance. Usually, the accuracy of a given weapon is reflected in the spacing of its crosshairs. Substantiating this idea is the effect of a laser sight attachment. After applying it, crosshairs will become tighter, creating increased reliability of hipfire. Taking a look at the weapon stats again, accuracy on the AK-47 is apparently 10 units lower, but the weapon evidently has tighter crosshairs when traded with the SCAR. But even with this said, both weapons have relatively poor hipfire reliability when firing automatically. Burst hipfire, however, is a viable tactic and lends a slight advantage to the AK-47 due to the starting crosshairs. Now, accuracy seems to affect more than just crosshairs, but also the odds of each round hitting their intended target. Otherwise, all sniper rifles would have the tightest crosshairs in Back 4 Blood. However, 2 of them sit at 100 while one sits at 75. It is possible that accuracy is affected differently across weapon classes. Focusing on the SCAR and the AK, I decided to test out shot reliability on a target 18 meters away, using 3 mags from each weapon, performing single shots to maximize their accuracy respectively. Based on the demonstration, the AK was able to hit all of its shots on the head, missing only a single round. The SCAR, on the other hand, missed an average of 2 to 3 rounds. The difference in crosshair accuracy seems to follow through with shot reliability. Taking this another step further with automatic fire, the SCAR and the AK also show differences in performance. When the SCAR is fired automatically, it tends to create greater variations in shot patterns. The AK-47, on the other hand, demonstrates more consistency in its shot pattern with fewer deviations, and consequently means less stress on recoil correction. Now, there may be an aspect of accuracy that I could be missing. However, so far, it would seem that the AK-47 has the edge in accuracy and shot reliability. Plus, speaking personally, I find handling the AK-47 somewhat easier and less stressful than the SCAR. That is only my experience, however. Lastly, the reload of both weapons are close to being the same, with the AK-47 taking 3 seconds and the SCAR taking approximately 3.2 seconds. The AK-47 will inflict a total of 280 units of damage per mag, while the SCAR will inflict 300. Both weapons have congruent fire rates and mag capacities. We stated earlier that the SCAR has an advantage with damage. Mag for mag, this remains true. With damage over time, however, the AK-47 will pass the SCAR by a minor total of 8 damage units. With a 0.2 second lead, the AK-47 is able to dish out 2 rounds before the SCAR can begin firing. 280, which is the mag damage for the AK, plus 28 units, or the damage of 2 rounds, is equivalent to 308. And this number will only compound over time. Initially, the AK will lead by 2 rounds. After the second mag, 4 rounds, then 6 rounds, and so on. Factoring in the easier and more reliable use of the AK-47, this weapon seems to be the underdog despite the stats. But taking a more practical perspective, this only has application with bosses and possibly tall boys as the toughest mutations. At the same time though, compounded damage lead in addition to one's card selections can amplify this effect. Moving on to the fully kitted side of the comparison, this part won't be as long and technical since the attachments are consistent and will garner the same results. The practical use of the weapon, however, is where the heart of the discussion is. A fully kitted weapon, meaning all purple or higher attachments, will garner very different results for each weapon. A fully kitted AK-47 will naturally be higher in all stats. However, I would admonish that one uses either a compensator for increased handling and mobility, or laser sight for increased hipfire and ADS shot reliability. This will ultimately come down to playstyle. Personally, I would consider it of greater benefit to use a compensator and reserve hipfire for emergencies. For the SCAR, a compensator will likely be the best bet for the barrel to alleviate the lower ease of use of the weapon. For the magazine slot, both weapons can use a buff in magazine capacity. If going with a gold mag attachment, then the SCAR would be best equipped with extended fast mag, for not only a boost in mag capacity but also an increase in reload speed. The AK, on the other hand, can benefit most from any of the extended mags, but least of all, extended AP mag, since penetration is not a particular weakness. This creates a high level of versatility in the AK-47 as opposed to a relegated or restrictive requirement of attachments. Moving on to the sights, this one is really up to personal preference. As assault rifles, I would argue that neither require anything beyond ACOG. Though personally, I prefer the reflex and hollow sights for increased move speed. Lastly, for the stock attachment, the split is between a light competition stock and a light tactical stock. Frankly, I wouldn't consider swap speed to be particularly important with this class of weapons, so competition stocks would take favor. A fully kitted AK-47 with a high-level compensator, extended HP mag, hollow sight, and competition stock will handle like a dream. The weapon will barely require much recoil control, and movement will be faster and smoother with or without ADS. Additionally, with the mag attachment, mutations will be easier to deal with due to the added stumbling capability. Now, there may not be any damage buffs unless an alternative mag attachment is selected, but I wouldn't say that damage is a major concern either. As for the SCAR, there will be a noticeable difference in its ease of use, not as pronounced as the AK-47, but easy enough that there shouldn't be issues worth mentioning. Overall, I can only come to 2 conclusions based on our 2 fronts of comparison. On a bare bones level, I would say the AK takes the cake with greater ease of use and reliability. Damage over time can also be a factor, but only under particular circumstances that require continuous fire, such as bosses or tough mutations. This is all negligible, however, with common written. When fully kitted with personalized attachments, I would give the weapons a draw. Technically, the AK will be even easier to use and have greater fighting ability against mutations. Meanwhile, the SCAR will have a faster reload and maintain its damage lead compared to the AK. When fully kitted, both weapons come down to preference. Bare Bones, however, accentuates their strengths and weaknesses to the point that the AK, in my opinion, as far as this comparison goes, will come out on top. Now, I know deck builds can make alternative possibilities, but because of how versatile decks can be, that is a conversation far too complex for a discussion like this. But I'd love to hear from you guys what your take is on this comparison. Do you prefer the AK or the SCAR? And if there are any disagreements, I welcome critical discussion, so feel free to leave your opinion on this comparison. But otherwise, that concludes the discussion. Thank you guys for joining me on this one, and in our next video, we'll be comparing the Vector and the Uzi SMGs. It's been Londononion, and I will see you guys next time.